Hi everyone, today we're going to be going over the third problem in our USACO training pages. It's called Friday the 13th, and what it wants us to do is to compute the number of times that the 13th of each month lands on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday over a given period of n years. So let's jump right into the pseudocode of this problem. The first thing we want to do is initialize our variable years. And this is essentially the input that the user gives us. It's the n period of years. So we want to take in years. The next thing we want to do is initialize a couple of variables. But before we get into that, let's discuss the approach that we'll be taking to solve this problem. The approach we'll be taking to solve this problem is to just hard code a way to run through each of the months and consequently each of the years in order to calculate the number of 13s that we need. We're going to do this because the largest input isn't even that large and it'll be pretty easy to hard code it, and it's probably the simplest solution. So now we're going to initialize an array called num of 13s. And as the name implies, num of 13s is going to tell us how many times Saturday, Sunday, Monday, etc. land on a 13. So since this is based on the days of the week, we just want to have it have 7 slots. So we're just going to put 7. Our next two arrays deal with the number of days in a month. And so our first one, num of days, is going to be for a normal month. The next one is going to be for a leap year. So the next thing we want to do is initialize another integer variable called day. And day is going to keep track of the day of the week that we're on, whether that be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, etc. And we actually want to initialize this as 2 to start off. And the reason is because day is going to correspond with num of 13s. And if we look back at the sample output format or the output format that they want us to give, they want us to start from Saturday and then go on to Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, etc. So essentially, the 0th index of our num of 13s will correspond to Saturday, the first correspond to Sunday, the second correspond to Monday, and so on. The problem also tells us that January 1st, 1990, which is the day they want us to start from, is a Monday. So, since Monday is the second index, we want to have day initialized to 2. The next thing we're going to do is have a for loop for the year so that we run through each year. And the limit here is just going to be the variable years. The next thing we want to do is determine whether this year is going to be a leap year or it's going to be a normal year. And we can determine whether it's a leap year or a normal year just by the conditions that they give us. So we know that by the conditions that they give us, that every 4 years is a leap year, or every year that is evenly divisible by 4. But this rule does not hold for century years, which are divisible by 400. If they are divisible by 400, then they are leap years. However, if they are not, then they would not be leap years. So we just take this into account while making our statement. So if leap year, and then else. So if it's a leap year, then what we want to do is go into our for month for loops. So we have a for loop for months. And our for loop for months is just going to go from 0 to 11 because there's 12 months and run through each month of the year. The next thing we want to do is have a for loop for days. So, let's just add in the for. Okay. So we want to have a for loop for days. And our for loop for days is going to have a limit of leap year and the variable m, which is the number of month in this case, because leap year will store the number of days in each of the months of our leap year. And here, what we actually want to do is now make sure that day is being properly taken care of. So we know that day has to keep track of the day that we're on, and so it should be initialized every day. So in our for loop of days, we just want to add in a quick note saying increment day. However, if we do increment day each day, then it's obviously going to reach beyond 7, which is the number of days in a week we have. And so what we want to do is check this. So since we start off at 0, the max that day should get should be 6, because that would be the end of our week, Friday. So if day gets to 7, when it gets incremented, then we want to reset it back to 0, because it's essentially being looped back to Saturday. The next thing we want to check here is if day is equal to 13. So what's going to happen is that we want to check whether this is a 13th. But since, again, we start from 0 here, we want to check if it is equal to 12. So if day is equal to 12, which essentially tells us if it's a 13th or not, because normal days just start from 1, whereas we're starting from 0, then we want to increment to the corresponding index of our num of 13s array. So it would be num of 13s and then day. And yeah, that should give us our num of 13s. And we're just going to repeat the same process for our else loop, except for instead of the limit being leap year m, it would just be num of days m. So let's just copy that. Oh, we should probably include the for loops. Okay, and now our entire year for loop is done. So at the end of this, we want to just simply print out the num of 13's array, and we should be good to go. So now let's actually start on coding our video, or coding our solution to this problem. Okay, so the first thing we want to start off with here is, again, initializing our year variable. So in years is equal to 0, and then we want to take in years. Once we've got that, we can initialize our arrays. So int num of 13s is 7, and since C++ doesn't automatically initialize your variables to 0, or even if they do, it's just really helpful to initialize it to 0, especially if you just have a small number, just to make sure that you don't get any funky outputs in relation to that. So we're just going to initialize all of these values to 0. And we want to then go on to our other two arrays. So int num of days, which here has a limit of 12. And here we're just going to input the number of days of each month. So let me just do that really quickly. Okay. So that should tell us the number of days of a normal year, and number of days per month for a normal year, sorry. And so now we're going to do a similar thing, but for a leap year. And so here, there is just a couple of changes. Okay, so that should give us our number of days per month in a leap year. And now we want to go into our main for loop, which has a limit of the years. Oops. And now we have our if statements to determine whether it's a leap year or not. So our if statement is just going to take into account the normal conditions for a leap year. So if 1900 plus I, which would give us the current year that we're on, is divisible by 100. We can see that by taking the mod of 100 and seeing if it's equal to 0. And if the 1900 plus I, which again gives you the year that we're at, is divisible by 400, then we know that that is going to be a leap year. And so let me just add brackets around this just in case. Okay, so now we can check the other condition. So we can just have or 1900 plus I, which would give us again the year that we're at, is divisible by 4 and equal to 0, and it is not divisible by 100 because we want to make sure that we're not accidentally letting in any, they're just divisible by 100. So not equal to 0. Okay, so that should give us the conditions for a leap year. And now let's go into creating our for loops. So the first for loop we're going to create is again for the months. So there's 12 months. And now we want to create a for loop for the days. And here the limit is going to be leap year M, which is just going to give us the number of days in the month N. So we want to increment D and also increment day because day increments every single day. And now we want to check if day is equal to 7 because then we want to set day to 0. And we also want to check if day is equal to 12 because then we're going to want to set day then that means that we have a 13. And so instead of incrementing day here, we actually want to increment num of 13s. And this has an index of day, and we want to increment that. So that is going to give us our if loop. And we want to do a similar thing for our for loop, or for our else loop. So else, which would give us for a normal year, and essentially the same code. However, there is one fix that we want to make here. And instead of leap year, we're actually just going to have num of days. Okay. So now that we're done with our main code, all we have to do now is just output our array num of 13s. So I'm just going to create a simple for loop to output this array. And it's really important to make sure that you're following the formatting that the USACO site wants you to. So just have a space here, like how they have, just separating the numbers by a space. And then at the end, just to be sure, just end the line. And then return 0. And we should be good here. So now let's put in our sample input, which is in this case 20. And our output should be 36, 33, 34, 33, 35, 35, and then 34. So it looks like we got the correct sample output, so our code works. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and stay tuned for more USACO training page problem videos. Thank you!